The coffee trembled in Nancy Walsh's hands as she sat in the back corner of the Secret Service briefing room, watching steam rise from the ceramic mug like morning mist over the Potomac. Her fingers wrapped around the cup with practiced precision, steadying the slight shake that had earned her the nickname she despised. Nervous Nancy. The agents who whispered it behind her back thought she couldn't hear, but Nancy heard everything. Every hushed conversation, every stifled laugh, every dismissive comment about the woman who somehow landed a spot on the presidential protection detail, despite her obvious inadequacies. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. What they didn't know was that the tremor in her hands wasn't nervousness at all. It was muscle memory from thousands of hours spent in places that didn't officially exist, holding weapons that weren't supposed to function, making shots that couldn't be documented. The slight quiver that everyone mistook for anxiety was actually her body's way of maintaining the microscopic muscle control that had once made her the most precise marksman in military history. The alarm clock's red glow painted the sparse walls of Nancy's Georgetown apartment at 4:30 in the morning, but she had been awake for nearly an hour. Sleep had become elusive over the past 18 months, ever since she'd accepted the position that everyone assured her was perfect for someone with her limitations. Administrative support for the Secret Service counter-assault team, they called it. A desk job with a badge that let important people feel good about hiring someone who looked like she needed help rather than someone who could provide it. Nancy rose from her narrow bed with movements that betrayed none of the precision that lived in her muscle memory. Her apartment was a study in deliberate mediocrity, furnished with pieces from discount stores and decorated with nothing that might suggest the woman who lived here had ever been anywhere more exotic than a suburban shopping mall. The only photograph in the entire space sat on her nightstand, a faded image of a middle-aged Latina woman with kind eyes and work-worn hands. Her mother, Elena Walsh, who had raised her daughter to believe that excellence was its own reward, even when no one else recognized it. The bathroom mirror reflected a face that most people would describe as pleasant but unremarkable. Soft features, brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses that she didn't actually need, shoulder-length dark hair that she kept in styles that never drew attention. At 32, Nancy had perfected the art of invisibility, crafting an appearance that made people's eyes slide past her without lingering. It was a skill that had taken years to develop and had kept her alive in places where being noticed meant being dead. She brushed her teeth for exactly 3 minutes, following the routine that had become as automatic as breathing. Her reflection showed no hint of the woman who could put 3 rounds through a quarter-sized target at 800 yards in cross winds that would challenge most snipers. Instead, it showed exactly what she wanted people to see: Nancy Walsh, the nervous administrative assistant who had somehow convinced someone to give her a job she wasn't qualified for. Her morning routine continued with the same unremarkable precision: toast, coffee, and a review of news reports that she read not for current events, but for patterns that might indicate threats to the man she was sworn to protect, the president's. Schedule for the day was routine by Washington standards: a morning briefing at the White House, followed by a speech at the Kennedy Center and an evening fundraiser at the Mayflower Hotel. 3 venues, multiple potential threat vectors, and hundreds of variables that could go wrong in the span of seconds. Nancy's trained mind automatically cataloged the security challenges each location presented, while her external demeanor remained that of someone simply reading the morning paper. Her fingers traced absent patterns on the table as she read, unconsciously following sight lines and calculating angles with the same muscle memory that made her hands shake. The movement looked like nervous fidgeting to anyone watching, but it was actually the physical manifestation of tactical planning that operated on a level most people couldn't comprehend. By 6:15, she was walking through the early morning streets of Washington, her footsteps echoing off empty sidewalks as the city slowly awakened around her. The autumn air carried the scent of fallen leaves and distant cooking fires from early rising food vendors, a combination that reminded her of other mornings in other cities where she had walked different streets with different names. Her current identity was just the latest in a series of carefully constructed personas, each one designed to hide the woman underneath while allowing her to continue the work that defined her existence. The J. Edgar Hoover building loomed ahead through the morning mist, its brutalist architecture casting long shadows across Pennsylvania Avenue. Nancy approached the employee entrance with the hesitant steps of someone who still wasn't entirely sure she belonged there, though she had been making the same walk for 18 months. Security guards who knew her by sight offered polite nods that contained just enough condescension to remind her of her place in the hierarchy. She was Nancy Walsh, administrative support, not quite important enough to warrant real respect, but too harmless to actively dislike. Her badge granted access to the secured floors where the counter-assault team operated, though her clearance level kept her confined to areas that dealt with logistics rather than operational planning. She made her way to a small office tucked away in a corner of the building, a space so unremarkable that most agents forgot it existed. The nameplate on her door read, N. Walsh, Administrative Specialist, a title that perfectly captured how invisible she had become within the organization. The office itself was a study in bureaucratic blandness. Gray walls, a metal desk that had seen better decades, and filing cabinets that contained the mundane paperwork that kept a complex security apparatus running smoothly. What wasn't visible was the sophisticated understanding of tactical operations that Nancy brought to even the most routine administrative tasks. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. When she filed reports about ammunition expenditures, she was actually tracking patterns that revealed training deficiencies. When she processed requests for equipment maintenance, she was identifying potential failure points that could compromise operations. Nancy's computer was already humming when she arrived, displaying the secure interface that connected her to databases she wasn't supposed to understand. Her official duties involved processing paperwork and maintaining files, but her real work happened in the margins of those responsibilities. She had spent 18 months quietly identifying vulnerabilities in security protocols, documenting equipment failures that weren't being reported, and tracking patterns of behavior that suggested some agents weren't as prepared as they claimed to be. The morning briefing materials were waiting in her inbox, routine reports that would be distributed to the appropriate personnel throughout the day. Nancy reviewed each document with the careful attention to detail that her colleagues attributed to obsessive perfectionism, but was actually the product of training that had taught her to find threats in seemingly innocent information. Today's reports contained the usual mix of intelligence updates, logistical requirements, and personnel assignments that painted a picture of an organization operating at peak efficiency. What the reports didn't show was the deeper analysis that Nancy conducted in her spare time, the pattern recognition that revealed troubling trends in the data. Equipment failures were increasing, response times were getting slower, and communication protocols were being ignored with alarming frequency. The counter-assault team was developing weaknesses that could prove fatal under the right circumstances, but Nancy's position in the organizational hierarchy meant that her observations would be dismissed as the concerns of someone who didn't understand operational realities. At 7:30, the first wave of agents began arriving for their shifts, their conversations echoing through the corridors as they prepared for another day of protecting the most powerful person in the world. Nancy listened to their discussions from her small office, cataloging information that officially wasn't her concern, but professionally was impossible to ignore. Agent Marcus Thompson was complaining about scope alignment issues that hadn't been resolved, despite multiple requests for maintenance. Agent Sarah Chun was mentioning communication, dead zones that had been discovered during the previous day's advance work, but hadn't been addressed in the official reports. These conversations contained critical intelligence about operational readiness, but they were being treated as casual complaints rather than security warnings. Nancy made careful notes in a personal journal that she kept locked in her desk drawer, documenting patterns that painted a concerning picture of an organization that had become too comfortable with its own reputation for excellence. The legendary precision of the Secret Service was being eroded by bureaucratic complacency and budget constraints that were forcing agents to work with substandard equipment and incomplete information. Agent Director Patricia Hawkins entered the building at 8 o'clock sharp, her presence commanding immediate attention from everyone within sight. At 55, Hawkins had built her career on a reputation for uncompromising professionalism and an ability to manage complex operations with military precision. She was the kind of leader who inspired loyalty through competence rather than charisma, and her approval carried weight throughout the organization. Nancy had observed Hawkins from a distance for months, noting how other agents responded to her presence with the respect reserved for someone who had earned their position through demonstrated excellence. What Nancy also observed was that Hawkins was operating under tremendous pressure from political appointees who prioritized public relations over operational security. Budget meetings had become exercises in creative accounting, with essential equipment purchases being delayed, while resources were redirected to programs that looked good in congressional hearings, but did little to enhance actual protection capabilities. The director was fighting battles on multiple fronts, trying to maintain operational readiness while satisfying political demands that often contradicted security requirements. The morning briefing began promptly at 8:15 in the main conference room, a sterile space dominated by screens displaying intelligence updates and operational schedules. Nancy attended these meetings as a note-taker, her presence so routine that most agents barely registered her existence. She sat in the back corner with her laptop and legal pad, officially recording decisions and assignments while actually conducting her own analysis of the information being presented. Today's briefing focused on the president's schedule, which included a speech at the Kennedy Center that would attract significant media attention and public interest. Agent Thompson presented the security plan with his usual confidence, outlining perimeter controls, personnel assignments, and communication protocols that looked comprehensive on paper. Nancy followed along with the official presentation while simultaneously identifying gaps that weren't being addressed in the formal planning process. The Kennedy Center presented unique challenges that weren't fully reflected in the standard security protocols. The building's complex architecture created numerous sight lines that couldn't be effectively monitored with current personnel allocations. The event timing coincided with rush hour traffic that would complicate emergency response procedures. Most critically, recent construction in the surrounding area had altered the tactical environment in ways that hadn't been incorporated into the security assessment. Nancy made careful notes about these discrepancies while maintaining the appearance of someone simply transcribing the meeting proceedings. Her observations would normally be shared through proper channels, but previous attempts to raise similar concerns had been politely dismissed as the overly cautious perspectives of someone who didn't understand operational realities. The culture of the organization discouraged input from administrative personnel, especially input that suggested operational deficiencies. Agent Chun raised questions about communication coverage in certain areas of the Kennedy Center, concerns that aligned with Nancy's own analysis of the security plan. The response from senior leadership was reassuring but vague, acknowledging the issue while suggesting that existing protocols were adequate to address any problems that might arise. Nancy recognized the language as the kind of bureaucratic deflection that prioritized confidence over accuracy, a pattern she had observed in other high-stakes environments, where admitting uncertainty was seen as weakness. The briefing concluded with assignments that distributed responsibility among team members, according to their official qualifications and seniority. Nancy's role was limited to maintaining communication logs and processing after-action reports, tasks that kept her removed from actual operational activities, but provided access to information that revealed how well the security plan was actually working. She had learned to extract valuable intelligence from routine administrative data, identifying patterns that weren't visible to people who only saw individual incidents rather than systemic trends. As agents filed out of the conference room to begin their preparations, Nancy remained behind to organize her notes and compile the official meeting summary. The document she would produce would reflect the confidence and competence that had been displayed during the briefing, but her personal analysis revealed significant concerns about the day's operations. The security plan was based on assumptions that might not hold under stress, and the organization's response capabilities had been degraded by resource constraints that weren't being acknowledged in operational planning. Nancy's phone buzzed with a text message from her mother, a routine check-in that had become part of their weekly communication schedule. Elena Walsh worried about her daughter's work in Washington, though she didn't understand the specific nature of Nancy's responsibilities. The message was simple and warm, asking about Nancy's health and reminding her to eat properly during what Elena assumed were long days of routine office work. Nancy replied with equal warmth, maintaining the fiction that her biggest professional challenge was managing filing systems rather than identifying threats to national security. The irony of her situation wasn't lost on Nancy as she responded to her mother's concern. Elena Walsh had raised her daughter to believe that hard work and competence would eventually be recognized and rewarded, but Nancy's experience had taught her that sometimes the most important work required deliberate obscurity. The skills that had once made her legendary in certain classified circles now had to be hidden behind a facade of mediocrity that protected both her mission and her life. Nancy's morning routine continued with tasks that appeared mundane, but served multiple purposes in her larger mission. She processed equipment requisitions that revealed budget constraints affecting operational readiness. She updated personnel files that showed training deficiencies and experience gaps in critical positions. She maintained communication logs that documented response times and protocol compliance during routine operations. Each task provided pieces of a larger puzzle that painted a concerning picture of organizational vulnerabilities. The counter-assault team's reputation for excellence was largely based on past performance and public perception rather than current capabilities. Budget cuts had forced the organization to defer maintenance on critical equipment while reducing training opportunities that kept agents sharp. Personnel changes had resulted in key positions being filled by individuals who met bureaucratic requirements but lacked the operational experience necessary for high-stress situations. The gaps were small individually but collectively created significant risks that weren't being addressed through normal channels. Nancy's unique perspective allowed her to see these patterns because her administrative responsibilities provided access to information from multiple departments while her operational background gave her the expertise to understand what the data actually meant. She was possibly the only person in the organization who had both the access and the knowledge necessary to conduct the kind of comprehensive threat assessment that the current situation required, but her official position made it impossible for her to share her conclusions through proper channels. The morning passed with routine efficiency as Nancy processed paperwork and responded to requests from agents preparing for the day's operations. Her interactions with colleagues remained professionally cordial but personally distant, maintaining the boundaries that kept her true capabilities hidden while allowing her to gather information about operational readiness. Agent Thompson stopped by her office to request files related to previous Kennedy Center events, giving Nancy an opportunity to observe his preparation methods and stress levels. Thompson was a competent agent with solid credentials and appropriate training, but Nancy noticed signs of fatigue and distraction that suggested he might not be operating at peak performance. His questions about historical security incidents revealed gaps in his knowledge of the venue that should have been addressed. During advance preparation, most concerning, his equipment requests indicated that he was working with backup gear rather than his primary systems, a situation that could prove critical if precise marksmanship became necessary. Nancy provided the requested files while carefully observing Thompson's demeanor and decision-making process. Her assessment was that he was prepared for routine protection duties, but might struggle with complex tactical situations that required split-second decisions under extreme pressure. This evaluation was based on subtle indicators that most people wouldn't notice, but Nancy's training had taught her to read stress responses and capability markers with scientific precision. Similar interactions throughout the morning provided Nancy with a comprehensive picture of the team's readiness for the day's operations. Agent Chun was dealing with equipment malfunctions that hadn't been resolved, despite multiple maintenance requests. Agent Rodriguez was operating with incomplete intelligence about recent changes to the Kennedy Center's security infrastructure. Agent Williams was managing personnel shortages that required shifting responsibilities to less experienced team members. Individually, these issues were manageable within normal operational parameters. Collectively, they represented a degradation of capabilities that could prove dangerous if the day's events took an unexpected turn. Nancy documented her observations in her personal files while maintaining her official duties with the competence and reliability that had earned her colleagues' respect, if not their recognition of her true capabilities. The President's morning schedule proceeded according to plan, with routine briefings and meetings that kept him within the secure perimeter of the White House complex. Nancy monitored his movements through official channels while conducting her own assessment of potential risks and response capabilities. The security team assigned to his protection was competent and well-trained, but they were operating within a system that had developed vulnerabilities that weren't being adequately addressed. Nancy's analysis extended beyond immediate tactical concerns to include broader strategic considerations that affected long-term security effectiveness. The organization's budget constraints were forcing decisions that prioritized short-term cost savings over operational readiness. Political pressures were influencing security protocols in ways that reduced flexibility and responsiveness. Most critically, the culture of confidence that had historically been the organization's strength was preventing honest assessment of current capabilities and limitations. The morning briefing materials included intelligence updates that Nancy reviewed, with particular attention to patterns and indicators that might suggest coordinated threats. Her training had taught her to look beyond individual incidents to identify systematic vulnerabilities that could be exploited by sophisticated adversaries. The current intelligence environment showed signs of increased activity by groups with both the motivation and capability to attempt operations against high-value targets. What concerned Nancy most was that the intelligence assessment didn't fully account for the operational limitations that she had observed within the organization. Threat evaluations were based on assumptions about response capabilities that might not accurately reflect current readiness levels. The gap between perceived and actual capabilities could prove critical if the day's events required the kind of precision and coordination that the counter-assault team was famous for, but might no longer be able to deliver consistently. Nancy's phone displayed a notification about the President's departure for the Kennedy Center, scheduled for early afternoon following his morning briefings and meetings. The timeline provided adequate preparation time for security teams, but Nancy's analysis of recent operations suggested that preparation quality had been declining due to resource constraints and personnel issues. The margin for error that had traditionally provided safety buffers was being eroded by systematic problems that weren't being addressed through normal channels. The irony of Nancy's situation became more apparent as the morning progressed and she prepared for her limited role in the day's operations. She possessed capabilities that could significantly enhance the security team's effectiveness, but her official position and carefully maintained cover prevented her from contributing her expertise where it might be needed most. The woman everyone called Nervous Nancy had skills that could save lives, but using those skills would require abandoning the identity that had kept her safe for 18 months. Nancy's personal equipment check was disguised as routine administrative preparation, but it reflected the same attention to detail that had once made her legendary in classified operations. Her earpiece was tuned to frequencies that would allow her to monitor security communications without officially being part of the tactical network. Her clothing was selected to provide freedom of movement while maintaining her professional appearance. Most importantly, her emergency protocols were reviewed and updated to account for the specific characteristics of the day's venues and potential threat scenarios. The morning concluded with Nancy's participation in a final briefing session that covered last-minute changes to the president's schedule and security arrangements. Her role was limited to administrative support, but she absorbed every detail of the operational plan, while identifying discrepancies and vulnerabilities that weren't being addressed through normal channels. The security plan was solid by conventional standards, but Nancy's enhanced perspective revealed gaps that could prove critical under stress. As the briefing ended and agents began their final preparations for the president's departure, Nancy remained in her small office, officially processing paperwork while actually conducting her own threat assessment and response planning. She had spent 18 months preparing for a moment that might never come, but if it did arrive, she would be ready to act despite the personal cost of revealing her true capabilities. The woman they called Nervous Nancy checked her watch and noted that the president would be leaving the White House in exactly 4 hours and 37 minutes. Her hands exhibited their characteristic slight tremor as she reached for her coffee cup, a movement that everyone interpreted as anxiety, but was actually muscle memory from 1,000 shots that had all found their mark. Today might be different from all the others, or it might be just another routine protection operation that ended without incident. Either way, Nancy Walsh would be ready for whatever came next, carrying skills that no one suspected and knowledge that could save lives if the moment demanded it. The ghost in the administrative office had been hiding in plain sight for 18 months, but circumstances were aligning that might force her to step out of the shadows and reveal the deadly competence that lived beneath her carefully constructed facade of nervous inadequacy. The secure elevator descended to the basement levels of the J. Edgar Hoover building with mechanical precision, carrying Agent Director Patricia Hawkins to a meeting she had been dreading for weeks. The fluorescent lights flickered against polished steel walls as she reviewed the classified briefing materials one final time, each page revealing intelligence that made her stomach clench with anxiety she couldn't afford to show. The threat assessment had escalated beyond routine security concerns into something that required resources she didn't possess and capabilities that had been compromised by months of bureaucratic interference. Deputy Director Michael Castellanos was waiting in the secure conference room when Hawkins arrived, his expression grim beneath silver hair that had grown noticeably thinner during his 30 years of government service. The walls around them were lined with screens displaying real-time intelligence, feeds from sources that officially didn't exist, painting a picture of coordinated activity that suggested something far more sophisticated than the usual lone wolf threats that dominated most security briefings. Castellanos gestured to a chair across from his position at the head of the table, his movements carrying the weight of someone who had delivered too many pieces of bad news to count. "Patricia," he began without preamble, "we have a problem that goes beyond normal operational parameters. The intelligence community has identified what appears to be a coordinated effort to target the president during his public appearances, specifically the Kennedy Center event this afternoon. He activated a wall display that showed surveillance, photos, communication intercepts, and financial transactions that painted a disturbing pattern of preparation and coordination. The images revealed faces that Hawkins recognized from previous threat assessments, individuals with both the motivation and capability to attempt sophisticated operations against protected targets. Hawkins studied the intelligence with the systematic attention to detail that had defined her career, noting connections and patterns that suggested a level of planning that exceeded most previous threats. The coordination extended across multiple cells operating in different geographic regions, each with specialized capabilities that could be combined into a comprehensive assault on security protocols. Financial records showed significant resource allocation to equipment and personnel that would be necessary for a complex operation, targeting a heavily protected venue like the Kennedy Center. "How solid is this intelligence?" Hawkins asked, though her expression suggested she already knew the answer would be disappointing. The sources were credible but incomplete, providing enough information to confirm a significant threat without offering the specific details necessary for effective countermeasures. The timing was particularly concerning, with the threat assessment reaching actionable intelligence levels just hours before the president's scheduled appearance at a venue that presented numerous tactical challenges. Castellanos leaned back in his chair, his fingers drumming against the table in a rhythm that betrayed his own anxiety about the situation. "Solid enough that we can't ignore it, but incomplete enough that we're operating with significant intelligence gaps. Our sources suggest the operation has been in planning for months, possibly longer, but we're still missing critical details about methodology, personnel, and specific targeting." The admission carried the weight of professional frustration, mixed with genuine concern about operational readiness. The intelligence brief continued with technical assessments of potential attack vectors that could be employed against the Kennedy Center, each scenario requiring different defensive responses and resource allocations. Hawkins absorbed the information while conducting her own mental review of available personnel and equipment, a calculation that revealed significant shortfalls in the capabilities needed to address the full spectrum of potential threats. The counter-assault team was operating with reduced personnel due to budget constraints and equipment limitations that hadn't been adequately addressed through normal procurement channels. "What's our current readiness assessment?" Hawkins inquired, though she suspected the answer would confirm her worst fears about operational capabilities. The team was competent and well-trained, but they were operating within a system that had been degraded by political interference and financial limitations that prioritized cost savings over security effectiveness. The legendary precision that had historically defined Secret Service operations was being eroded by systematic problems that weren't being addressed through normal channels. Castellanos consulted his tablet before responding with information that Hawkins had been hoping wouldn't be confirmed through official channels. "We're operating at approximately 75% of optimal capacity. Equipment maintenance has been deferred due to budget constraints. Training schedules have been reduced to accommodate personnel shortages and our intelligence coordination. Capabilities have been limited by communication system upgrades that aren't functioning as designed." The assessment painted a picture of an organization struggling to maintain effectiveness while dealing with external pressures that weren't under operational control. The meeting continued with detailed discussions of specific vulnerabilities that had been identified through routine security assessments, each weakness representing a potential exploitation opportunity for sophisticated adversaries. The Kennedy Center's complex architecture created numerous challenges for traditional security protocols, while recent construction in the surrounding area had altered sightlines and access routes in ways that hadn't been fully incorporated into defensive planning. Most concerning, the communication infrastructure that coordinated security responses had developed reliability issues that could prove critical during high-stress operations. Hawkins made careful notes while absorbing information that confirmed her growing concerns about the team's ability to respond effectively to complex threats. The intelligence suggested adversaries who understood security protocols well enough to exploit specific weaknesses, a level of sophistication that required countermeasures beyond standard protective procedures. The threat wasn't just about preventing direct attacks, but about maintaining operational effectiveness while dealing with systematic attempts to degrade security capabilities through various forms of interference. "I need options," Hawkins stated, with the authority of someone accustomed to making difficult decisions under extreme pressure. The standard response protocols were designed for threats that operated within predictable parameters, but the current intelligence suggested adversaries who had studied security procedures extensively and developed countermeasures specifically designed to exploit known vulnerabilities. Traditional defensive measures might prove inadequate against opponents who understood how to turn security protocols against the people they were designed to protect. Castellanos presented a series of recommendations that ranged from reasonable tactical adjustments to extreme measures that would fundamentally alter the president's public schedule. Canceling the Kennedy Center appearance was the safest option from a security perspective, but it would send signals about government confidence that could have political ramifications extending far beyond immediate security concerns. Reducing the event's scope and public access would limit exposure while maintaining the appearance of normal operations, though it would also reduce the political effectiveness that made the appearance valuable in the first place. The conversation revealed the complex balance between security requirements and political necessities that define protection operations at the highest levels of government. Every decision carried implications that extended beyond immediate tactical considerations to include public perception, political messaging, and long-term strategic communications. Hawkins found herself navigating between operational requirements that demanded maximum security and political pressures that required maintaining the appearance of normalcy despite credible threats. "What about additional resources?" Hawkins asked, knowing the answer would likely be negative, but needing to explore every available option. The federal budget allocation process moved too slowly to address immediate operational needs, while interagency coordination requirements created bureaucratic delays that could prove critical during time-sensitive situations. The resources needed to address the current threat level simply weren't available through normal channels, requiring creative solutions that might not conform to standard protocols. Castellanos shook his head with the resignation of someone who had fought similar battles throughout his career. Congressional appropriations are locked until the next fiscal year, and emergency funding requests require justification levels that would compromise operational security. "We're working with what we have, which means maximizing efficiency while accepting elevated risk levels that aren't ideal but may be unavoidable." The admission reflected the reality of government operations where political considerations often conflicted with security requirements. The meeting concluded with assignments that distributed responsibility among available personnel according to their official qualifications and security clearances. Hawkins would oversee operational coordination while managing political communications that kept relevant officials informed without compromising sensitive intelligence. Castellanos would handle interagency coordination and resource allocation within existing budget constraints. The plan was comprehensive within available parameters, but both officials understood that they were operating with significant limitations that could prove critical if the intelligence proved accurate. As Hawkins returned to her office, she carried with her the weight of information that painted a disturbing picture of coordinated threats against security protocols that had been weakened by systematic problems beyond her direct control. The counter-assault team was competent and dedicated, but they were operating within a system that had developed vulnerabilities that weren't being adequately addressed through normal channels. The gap between required capabilities and available resources had grown to dangerous levels that could prove critical during complex operations. Nancy Walsh was processing routine paperwork when her computer terminal displayed an urgent message, requiring immediate attention to communication protocols for the afternoon's operations. The request appeared routine to anyone observing her work, but Nancy recognized the indicators of elevated threat levels that weren't being communicated through normal channels. Her administrative access provided visibility into resource allocation, patterns that revealed significant concerns about operational readiness, concerns that aligned with her own assessment of systemic vulnerabilities. The message contained technical specifications for communication equipment that suggested backup systems were being activated due to reliability concerns with primary infrastructure. Nancy's operational background allowed her to interpret these requirements as indicators of serious problems that were being addressed through contingency protocols rather than direct solutions. The counter-assault team was preparing for scenarios that exceeded normal parameters, though the specific nature of the threats wasn't being communicated to administrative personnel. Nancy's analysis of the communication requirements revealed patterns that suggested coordination challenges beyond routine operational complexity. The backup systems being deployed were designed for situations where primary communication networks might be compromised or unreliable, scenarios that typically occurred during hostile environments or equipment failures that compromise security. Effectiveness. The fact that these systems were being activated for a domestic protection operation indicated threat levels that weren't being acknowledged through official channels. Agent Thompson stopped by Nancy's office to collect updated equipment assignments, his demeanor reflecting stress levels that exceeded normal pre-operation tension. His conversation revealed concerns about gear reliability and personnel coordination that suggested preparation challenges beyond routine logistical complexity. Nancy observed his behavior with the trained eye of someone who understood stress indicators, noting signs of fatigue and distraction that could affect performance during critical situations. The communication checks aren't going smoothly, Thompson mentioned while reviewing his assignment papers, unaware that his casual comment provided Nancy with critical intelligence about operational readiness. The technical problems he described suggested systematic issues with equipment reliability that could prove dangerous during coordinated operations requiring precise timing and coordination. Nancy made careful mental notes while maintaining her facade of administrative concern rather than operational expertise. Thompson's equipment requests revealed additional concerns about backup systems and redundant capabilities that indicated preparation for scenarios where primary equipment might fail or be compromised. His stress levels suggested awareness of threat intelligence that wasn't being shared with administrative personnel, though Nancy's background allowed her to interpret his behavior as indicators of elevated operational complexity. The security team was preparing for contingencies that exceeded normal protective protocols. Agent Chun arrived shortly after Thompson's departure, her expression reflecting similar concerns about operational readiness and equipment reliability. Her questions about historical incident reports suggested that security planners were reviewing previous threats and security breaches to identify patterns that might inform current preparations. Nancy provided the requested information while observing Chun's demeanor and stress indicators, noting signs of heightened alertness that suggested awareness of specific intelligence about potential threats. Have you noticed any unusual patterns in recent incident reports? Chun asked, her question revealing operational concerns that weren't being discussed through normal channels. Nancy's administrative responsibilities provided access to historical data that could reveal trends and patterns relevant to current threat assessments, though her official position prevented her from offering analytical insights that might compromise her cover identity. She provided factual responses while avoiding commentary that might reveal her true capabilities. Chun's review of historical data focused specifically on incidents involving coordinated attacks and communication disruptions that had affected previous security operations. Her interest in these specific scenarios suggested intelligence about current threats that shared similar characteristics, though the details weren't being communicated to administrative personnel. Nancy recognized the patterns Chen was investigating as indicators of sophisticated threats that required enhanced security protocols and specialized response capabilities. The morning progressed with increasing signs of operational tension that suggested elevated threat levels beyond routine security concerns. Personnel movements indicated preparation for complex scenarios that required specialized equipment and coordination protocols typically reserved for high-risk environments. Nancy observed these indicators while maintaining her administrative duties, processing paperwork that provided additional intelligence about resource allocation and operational planning. Agent Rodriguez requested access to classified communication protocols that suggested preparation for scenarios where standard security channels might be compromised or unreliable. His technical requirements indicated awareness of potential interference with normal communication systems, concerns that aligned with Nancy's own assessment of systematic vulnerabilities in security infrastructure. The counter-assault team was preparing for contingencies that required backup systems and alternative protocols. Nancy's analysis of equipment requisitions revealed patterns suggesting preparation for extended operations rather than routine protective activities. The resources being allocated indicated scenarios where security teams might need to maintain defensive positions for longer periods than normal, or deal with multiple coordinated threats that required sustained response capabilities. The operational planning reflected threat assessments that exceeded normal parameters for domestic protection operations. Director Hawkins appeared in the administrative section during mid-morning, her presence indicating direct oversight of preparation activities that normally would be delegated to subordinate personnel. Nancy observed Hawkins' demeanor and communication patterns, noting stress indicators that suggested serious concerns about operational readiness and threat assessment. The director's personal involvement indicated elevated risk levels that weren't being communicated through normal channels. Hawkins' conversation with senior agents revealed fragments of intelligence about coordinated threats and systematic vulnerabilities that painted a disturbing picture of security challenges beyond routine complexity. Nancy absorbed this information while maintaining her administrative facade, processing intelligence that confirmed her own assessment of systematic problems within security protocols. The threats being discussed required capabilities that might exceed the team's current operational readiness. The director's instructions to senior personnel indicated preparation for scenarios involving multiple coordinated attacks and potential compromise of standard security infrastructure. Her emphasis on backup protocols and alternative communication systems suggested intelligence about adversaries who understood security procedures well enough to exploit known vulnerabilities. The counter-assault team was preparing for threats that required adaptive responses beyond standard protective protocols. Nancy's computer displayed additional equipment, requests that revealed the scope of preparations being undertaken for the afternoon's operations. The resources being allocated exceeded normal requirements for venue security, indicating threat assessments that required enhanced defensive capabilities and specialized response equipment. The pattern suggested intelligence about specific threats that required countermeasures beyond routine security protocols. Agent Williams joined the growing number of personnel seeking access to enhanced equipment and communication capabilities, his requests indicating awareness of potential scenarios that could overwhelm standard security responses. His technical requirements suggested preparation for coordinated attacks that might target communication systems and equipment reliability simultaneously. Nancy recognized these patterns as indicators of sophisticated threats that required specialized countermeasures. The administrative section became increasingly busy as personnel prepared for operations that clearly exceeded routine parameters, though the specific nature of the threats wasn't being communicated to support staff. Nancy processed requests and maintained files while absorbing intelligence about operational complexity that aligned with her own assessment of systematic vulnerabilities. The security team was preparing for scenarios that tested the limits of their current capabilities. Nancy's analysis of personnel assignments revealed resource allocation patterns that suggested significant concerns about operational readiness and threat assessment. Key personnel were being assigned to multiple roles that indicated shortfalls in available expertise, while equipment distribution suggested preparation for scenarios where standard protocols might prove inadequate. The counter-assault team was operating at the edge of their capabilities while dealing with threats that required enhanced response measures. Agent Davis approached Nancy's office with requests for historical data about previous security breaches and incident patterns that might inform current operational planning. His questions revealed operational concerns about coordinated attacks and systematic vulnerabilities that weren't being addressed through normal security protocols. Nancy provided the requested information while noting indicators of elevated threat levels that exceeded routine protective operations. The morning's activities painted a clear picture of security operations, preparing for threats that challenged standard protocols and available resources. Nancy observed these preparations while maintaining her administrative responsibilities, processing intelligence that confirmed her assessment of systematic vulnerabilities within security infrastructure. The counter-assault team was facing challenges that might require capabilities beyond their current operational readiness. As noon approached, the pace of preparation activities increased dramatically, with personnel and equipment being allocated according to threat assessments that clearly exceeded normal parameters for domestic protection operations. Nancy processed the final administrative requirements while absorbing intelligence about operational complexity that suggested the afternoon's events would test every aspect of security effectiveness. The woman everyone called Nervous Nancy was preparing for scenarios that might finally require her to reveal the deadly competence hidden beneath her carefully constructed facade of administrative mediocrity. The Kennedy Center's grand foyer buzzed with controlled activity as Secret Service personnel conducted final security sweeps before the president's arrival. Nancy Walsh stood near the information desk with her clipboard and earpiece, officially monitoring communication protocols, while actually conducting her own threat assessment of the venue's tactical environment. The afternoon light streaming through the massive windows created shifting patterns of shadow and illumination that would complicate visual identification of potential threats, while the building's complex architecture offered numerous concealment opportunities that weren't adequately covered by current personnel deployment. Agent Thompson's voice crackled through the communication network, reporting completion of perimeter checks that Nancy knew were insufficient based on her analysis of the building's vulnerabilities. His position on the upper balcony provided good sight lines across the main floor, but his backup equipment was showing intermittent reliability issues that could prove critical during high-stress situations. Nancy made mental notes about communication, dead zones and sightline obstructions, while maintaining her facade of administrative support rather than tactical analysis. The presidential motorcade was 15 minutes out, according to the latest update, which meant security protocols should be functioning at peak efficiency to ensure seamless protection during the transfer from vehicles to the secured interior of the building. Nancy monitored radio traffic while observing personnel positions, noting discrepancies between official assignments and actual deployment that suggested last-minute adjustments to address equipment failures and communication problems that hadn't been resolved through normal maintenance channels. Agent Chun's position near the main entrance provided critical coverage of the primary access route, but her communication equipment was experiencing the same reliability issues that had plagued other team members throughout the day. Her reports came through with static and delay that indicated systematic problems with the backup communication systems that were supposed to provide redundancy during complex operations. Nancy recognized these patterns as indicators of coordinated interference that suggested adversaries with sophisticated technical capabilities. Director Hawkins appeared in the main foyer with an expression that reflected controlled concern about operational readiness and threat assessment. Her presence indicated direct oversight of security protocols that normally would be delegated to field supervisors, suggesting elevated risk levels that required senior leadership involvement. Nancy observed Hawkins' communication patterns and stress indicators, noting signs of information that wasn't being shared through normal channels. "Control, this is Hawk 1. Hawkins spoke into her radio with the measured tone of someone managing multiple crises simultaneously. "Confirm all stations are showing green status for package arrival." The responses came back with varying degrees of confidence, revealing communication problems and equipment issues that painted a concerning picture of operational readiness. Nancy absorbed this intelligence while processing routine paperwork that provided cover for her presence in the secure area. Agent Rodriguez reported from his position in the parking structure, his voice revealing frustration about sightline obstructions caused by construction equipment that hadn't been properly cleared from the security perimeter. His technical assessment indicated potential concealment opportunities that weren't being adequately monitored by available personnel, creating vulnerabilities that sophisticated adversaries could exploit during the transfer from vehicles to building interior. The communication network suddenly erupted with urgent reports from multiple positions as agents identified suspicious activity that exceeded normal crowd control parameters. Nancy's trained ear caught the subtle changes in voice patterns and communication protocols that indicated transition from routine security operations to active threat response. Her pulse quickened as muscle memory prepared her body for scenarios that her official position wasn't supposed to anticipate. Multiple subjects displaying coordination patterns consistent with surveillance activities, Agent Williams reported. From his position monitoring crowd control barriers, his description of suspect behavior aligned with Nancy's own observations of individuals whose movements suggested professional training rather than casual interest in the presidential visit. The tactical situation was developing beyond routine security concerns into something that required enhanced response capabilities. Nancy moved closer to the main communication console while maintaining her administrative cover, positioning herself to monitor multiple frequency channels that revealed the scope of suspicious activity being reported by various team members. The pattern emerging from field reports suggested coordinated surveillance by multiple teams, operating with sophisticated knowledge of security protocols and personnel deployment patterns. Agent Davis's voice cut through the radio chatter with urgent intelligence that confirmed Nancy's worst fears about the developing situation. "Control, I have positive identification of subjects from this morning's briefing materials. Repeat. We have confirmed presence of individuals from threat assessment briefings." The revelation sent immediate alerts through the security network as personnel adjusted positions to address verified threats rather than routine crowd control activities. Director Hawkins' response was immediate and professional, implementing enhanced security protocols that indicated preparation for potential coordinated attacks against protection systems. All stations, upgrade to Condition Orange. Implement ENHANCED observation protocols and prepare for potential package diversion to alternate location. Her instructions revealed contingency planning for scenarios where the venue might be compromised by sophisticated threats. Nancy's administrative position provided access to communication channels that revealed the full scope of the developing crisis as multiple teams reported suspicious activities that suggested coordinated preparation for assault on security protocols. The intelligence painted a picture of adversaries who understood Secret Service procedures well enough to position themselves for maximum effectiveness against standard protective responses. The presidential motorcade was now 8 minutes out. According to updated tracking information, which meant critical decisions about security protocols and potential venue changes needed to be made immediately. Nancy monitored radio traffic while processing the tactical implications of intelligence reports that suggested threats beyond the team's current capabilities to address effectively with available resources and personnel deployment. Agent Thompson's equipment failure occurred at the worst possible moment, his communication going silent just as his position became critical for monitoring potential threat vectors from the upper levels. Nancy recognized the tactical implications immediately, understanding that the loss of his coverage created vulnerabilities that couldn't be adequately addressed by remaining personnel, given their current positions and equipment limitations. Hawk Control, this is Thompson. I'm experiencing complete communication failure and request immediate technical support. Came through broken transmissions that revealed the extent of equipment problems affecting operational effectiveness. Nancy's trained assessment indicated that communication failures were occurring in patterns consistent with coordinated electronic interference rather than random equipment malfunctions. Agent Chun reported similar problems from her position at the main entrance, her communication cutting in and out with interference patterns that suggested sophisticated jamming equipment designed to disrupt security coordination without completely blocking all transmissions. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly as communication systems failed at precisely the moments when coordination was most critical for effective response. Nancy realized that the developing crisis exceeded the team's ability to respond effectively with their current capabilities and equipment limitations. The communication failures were creating coordination problems that could prove fatal if the suspected threats materialized into actual attacks against security protocols. Her operational background provided understanding of tactical situations that required immediate action to prevent catastrophic failures. The sound of approaching helicopters indicated that the presidential party was proceeding according to schedule despite developing security concerns, which meant protection protocols needed to function perfectly despite systematic equipment failures and communication problems. Nancy's analysis of the tactical situation revealed vulnerabilities that couldn't be addressed through normal channels given the time constraints and resource limitations affecting the security team. Director Hawkins' voice carried increased urgency as she coordinated responses to multiple developing threats while managing equipment failures that compromised operational effectiveness. All stations prepare for immediate implementation of emergency protocols. Package arrival is proceeding, but we have confirmed hostile presence requiring enhanced response measures. Her instructions revealed the gravity of the situation while maintaining professional composure under extreme pressure. Nancy's position near the communication console provided access to intelligence that painted a comprehensive picture of coordinated threats against security systems that were already compromised by equipment failures and personnel limitations. The combination of sophisticated adversaries and degraded defensive capabilities created a perfect storm of tactical challenges that exceeded normal protective protocols. Agent Rodriguez's position in the parking structure became critical as he reported visual contact with subjects displaying behavior consistent with coordinated attack preparation. Control, I have multiple subjects in tactical positions with sightlines to package arrival route. Request immediate response team deployment. His report confirmed that theoretical threats were transitioning into actual tactical situations, requiring immediate countermeasures. The presidential motorcade was now 4 minutes out, which meant security protocols needed to function flawlessly, despite communication failures and confirmed hostile presence in tactical positions around the venue. Nancy's analysis of the developing situation revealed tactical requirements that exceeded the team's current capabilities, given their equipment limitations and coordination problems. Nancy made a decision that would change everything. Moving away from her administrative position, she approached Director Hawkins with information that required revealing capabilities she had kept hidden for 18 months. Director, I need to speak with you immediately about tactical options that aren't being considered through normal channels. Her tone carried authority that contradicted her official position as administrative support. Hawkins turned toward Nancy with confusion and irritation about timing. But something in Nancy's demeanor made her pause and listen, despite the developing crisis requiring her immediate attention. "Walsh, this isn't the time for administrative concerns. We have confirmed threats requiring all available response capabilities." Her dismissal was automatic, but Nancy's response stopped her completely. "Director, my name is Nancy Walsh, but 18 months ago I was Master Sergeant Elena Vasquez. And I need you to listen very carefully, because I'm the only person here who can solve your tactical problem." The revelation hit Hawkins like a physical blow as she recognized the name from classified briefings about legendary snipers whose capabilities exceeded normal human parameters. Nancy continued with information that revealed the full scope of her background and current assessment of the tactical situation. "I've been monitoring team readiness and threat assessment, and you're facing coordinated attacks by adversaries who understand your protocols well enough to exploit systematic vulnerabilities. Your communication systems are being jammed by sophisticated equipment, your personnel are positioned incorrectly for the developing threat pattern, and you have approximately 3 minutes to implement countermeasures or the president dies." Hawkins stared at Nancy with a mixture of disbelief and recognition as pieces of information aligned to confirm the impossible reality that her administrative assistant was actually one of the military's most legendary marksmen. Elena Vasquez died in a training accident 2 years ago. The records are classified but confirmed. Her response revealed knowledge of Nancy's previous identity while struggling to process the implications of her presence. Elena Vasquez disappeared into witness protection after testifying about defense contractor fraud that resulted in compromised equipment being distributed to military units. "I've been Nancy Walsh for 18 months, gathering intelligence about systematic vulnerabilities while maintaining cover that kept me safe from retaliation." Nancy's explanation provided context while time continued to count down toward potential catastrophe. The radio crackled with Agent Chun's urgent report about subjects moving into final positions around the venue perimeter, confirming that theoretical threats were transitioning into immediate tactical reality. "Control, multiple subjects are displaying coordination consistent with imminent assault on security protocols. Request immediate authorization for enhanced response measures." Her transmission revealed the urgency of the developing situation. Nancy continued her revelation while providing tactical analysis that demonstrated capabilities far beyond administrative support. "The jamming equipment affecting your communications is positioned in 3 locations that I can identify from. Acoustic analysis of the interference patterns. Your sniper positions are being monitored by counter-surveillance teams who understand your deployment protocols. Most critically, the attack pattern is designed to force the president into a kill zone that your current positioning can't adequately protect." Director Hawkins processed Nancy's information while managing radio communications that confirmed the accuracy of her tactical assessment. The developing situation matched Nancy's analysis with precision that indicated either extraordinary analytical capabilities or direct knowledge of adversary planning. Given the confirmed identity and legendary reputation of Elena Vasquez, Hawkins realized she was dealing with someone whose capabilities could address tactical problems beyond normal response parameters. "What do you need?" Hawkins asked with the decisive authority of someone accustomed to making critical decisions under extreme pressure. Her question acknowledged Nancy's expertise while requesting specific requirements for implementing solutions to the developing crisis. The presidential motorcade was now 2 minutes out, which meant tactical decisions needed immediate implementation. Nancy's response revealed planning that had been developing throughout her 18 months of observation and analysis. "I need access to the acoustic equipment storage room, authorization to deploy to the upper observation deck, and confirmation that you can maintain communication blackout for exactly 4 minutes during implementation of countermeasures. The equipment I need is already in the building because I requested it through routine maintenance channels months ago. The request revealed sophisticated preparation that indicated Nancy had been planning for exactly this type of scenario while maintaining her administrative cover. Hawkins realized that her unremarkable assistant had been conducting operational preparation disguised as routine building maintenance, positioning resources for tactical scenarios that officially weren't supposed to occur. Authorized, Hawkins responded without hesitation, her decision reflecting recognition of capabilities that exceeded normal parameters, combined with tactical necessity that required extraordinary solutions. All stations, be advised that Specialist Walsh is implementing enhanced countermeasures under my direct authorization. Maintain current positions and prepare for coordinated response on my signal. Nancy moved toward the equipment access area with purpose that revealed training and confidence hidden beneath 18 months of careful mediocrity. Her transformation from nervous administrative assistant to tactical specialist was immediate and complete, muscle memory taking over as she accessed equipment that had been positioned for exactly this scenario. The woman everyone called nervous. Nancy was finally revealing the deadly competence that had made Elena Vasquez legendary. The presidential motorcade rounded the final corner toward the Kennedy Center as Nancy reached the upper observation deck with equipment that would determine whether the most powerful person in the world lived or died in the next few minutes. Her hands no longer trembled with nervous energy, but moved with the precision that had once made impossible shots seem routine. The ghost was about to become visible, and the stakes couldn't be higher. Nancy's fingers closed around the custom rifle she had hidden in the acoustic equipment room 18 months earlier, the weapon responding to her touch like an extension of her own body. The Barrett M82 had been disguised as building maintenance equipment, its components distributed among legitimate supplies that no one had questioned because maintenance requests from administrative personnel were beneath notice. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency as she assembled the weapon that would either save a life or end her carefully constructed new existence. The upper observation deck provided sightlines across the Kennedy Center's approach routes that she had memorized during months of routine building inspections disguised as administrative duties. Nancy positioned herself behind the reinforced windows, her body automatically adopting the stance that had once made her legendary among special operations units whose existence remained classified. The tremor in her hands that everyone attributed to nervousness was actually microscopic, muscle adjustments that maintained the precision necessary for shots, measured in fractions of inches at distances exceeding human visual capability. Through her scope, Nancy identified 3 separate threat positions that confirmed her analysis of the coordinated attack pattern. The primary shooter was positioned on a rooftop 400 meters northeast, his equipment and positioning indicating professional training and sophisticated preparation. The secondary threat was located in a construction zone 300 meters to the west, while the tertiary position occupied a parking structure that provided backup coverage if the primary assault failed. Director Hawkins' voice crackled through Nancy's earpiece with updates about the presidential motorcade's approach. Package is 60 seconds out. All stations maintain positions and prepare for enhanced protective measures. Her tone carried the controlled tension of someone managing multiple crises simultaneously while trusting capabilities she had never witnessed firsthand. Nancy's scope revealed details about the primary threat that confirmed her worst fears about the sophistication of the coordinated attack. The shooter was using equipment identical to her own, suggesting access to military-grade weapons through channels that indicated significant resources and planning. His positioning demonstrated knowledge of Secret Service protocols that suggested either inside information or extensive surveillance of previous protective operations. The wind conditions were challenging but manageable, with cross winds that would affect bullet trajectory in predictable patterns that Nancy could compensate for using techniques developed during classified operations in hostile environments. Her breathing settled into the rhythm that had once made impossible shots seem routine, each inhalation and exhalation timed to minimize movement during the critical moment, when her weapon would determine whether justice or catastrophe prevailed. Nancy's earpiece carried reports from ground agents, confirming the approach of multiple threats that exceeded the team's ability to address through conventional protective measures. Multiple subjects converging on package route with coordinated timing that suggests professional coordination. Agent Rodriguez reported from his compromised position in the parking structure. His assessment confirmed that standard security protocols were insufficient to address the level of sophistication being deployed against them. The presidential limousine appeared in Nancy's scope as the motorcade rounded the final approach curve, its armored hull gleaming in the afternoon sunlight that created both protection and vulnerability through reflection patterns that could either conceal or reveal depending on positioning and timing. Nancy tracked the vehicle's movement while simultaneously maintaining awareness of threat positions that were adjusting their aim points as the target approached the predetermined kill zone. "Primary threat is acquiring target," Nancy whispered into her microphone, her voice carrying the calm authority of someone who had operated in situations where seconds determined outcomes. Her scope revealed the enemy sniper's final preparations as he settled into position for a shot that would change history if it found its mark. The distance between success and failure was measured in millimeters and milliseconds that would test every aspect of her legendary capabilities. Nancy's finger found the trigger with pressure that had been calibrated through thousands of hours of practice and hundreds of confirmed eliminations in situations where failure meant death for innocent people. Her breathing stopped at the natural pause between inhalation and exhalation, her heartbeat settling into the steady rhythm that provided the biological stability necessary for precision that exceeded normal human parameters. The enemy sniper's weapon moved toward final alignment with the presidential limousine as Nancy's own rifle tracked him with movements so subtle they were invisible to observers who didn't understand the mechanics of precision shooting at extreme distances. Her scope revealed facial features that she committed to memory while calculating wind compensation and trajectory, adjustments that would determine whether her shot arrived before his finger completed its deadly mission. "Taking the shot, Nancy," announced with the professional calm that had once defined Alada Vasquez during operations that couldn't be acknowledged or celebrated. Her trigger finger applied pressure with the mechanical precision that had made her legendary, the weapon responding with perfect function as the bullet began its journey across 400 meters of space and time toward a target whose elimination would prevent catastrophe. The bullet's flight time was approximately 1.5 seconds, during which Nancy's scope tracked the target while her mind calculated probability factors and contingency responses for scenarios ranging from complete success to partial failure. Her breathing remained controlled as she prepared for immediate follow-up shots if the primary round failed to achieve complete neutralization of the threat. The impact was visible through her scope as the enemy sniper's position erupted in a spray of equipment and debris that confirmed successful elimination of the primary threat. Nancy's shot had found its mark with the precision that had once made her legendary, removing the most dangerous element of the coordinated attack before it could complete its mission. The presidential limousine continued its approach route, unaware that death had passed within inches of achieving its objective. Nancy immediately shifted her scope to the secondary threat position, her muscle memory transitioning to the next target with efficiency that demonstrated training and experience beyond normal parameters. The Western shooter was adjusting his position to compensate for the elimination of his primary colleague, his movements revealing professional training that required corresponding expertise to neutralize effectively. Primary threat eliminated. Engaging secondary target. Nancy reported with the matter-of-fact tone of someone providing tactical updates during routine operations rather than life-or-death scenarios that would determine presidential survival. Her scope acquired the second target as he attempted to relocate to a position that would provide better sightlines despite the loss of his primary support element. The second shot was more challenging due to the target's movement and the increased distance created by his repositioning efforts. Nancy compensated for these variables with calculations that occurred below conscious thought, her training and experience providing automatic adjustments that accounted for every factor affecting bullet trajectory over the extended range. Her breathing cycle reset as she prepared for a shot that would complete the neutralization of coordinated threats. Nancy's second bullet found its target with the same precision that had eliminated the primary threat, confirming that 18 months of administrative work hadn't degraded the capabilities that had made Elena Vasquez legendary among special operations communities. The Western position fell silent as equipment and personnel were neutralized with efficiency that prevented any possibility of completing the coordinated attack against presidential protection. The tertiary threat in the parking structure had witnessed the elimination of his colleagues and was attempting withdrawal rather than continuation of the mission, his movement patterns indicating recognition that the coordinated attack had failed. Due to superior counter-sniper capabilities, Nancy tracked his retreat while maintaining readiness to engage if he attempted to reposition for continued assault on protective protocols. All threats neutralized. "Package is secure," Nancy announced, as the presidential limousine completed its approach to the Kennedy Center without incident. Her voice carried the professional satisfaction of someone who had successfully completed a mission that protected innocent life while preventing catastrophic failure of security systems. The woman everyone called Nervous Nancy had just demonstrated capabilities that exceeded legendary status. Director Hawkins' response came through the communication network with a mixture of relief and amazement at the successful resolution of crisis that had threatened to become a national tragedy. "Outstanding work, specialist. Package delivery is complete and secure. All stations stand down from emergency protocols." Her acknowledgement confirmed that Nancy's intervention had prevented disaster while maintaining operational security requirements. Nancy began disassembling her weapon with the same efficiency that had characterized its deployment, muscle memory, performing tasks that would eliminate evidence of capabilities that officially didn't exist. The Barrett M82 returned to its disguised state as building maintenance equipment, its transformation complete before other personnel could reach the observation deck to investigate the source of the shots that had saved presidential life. The aftermath of Nancy's intervention would require careful management to maintain operational security while acknowledging the successful prevention of catastrophic failure. Her true identity as Elena Vasquez would need to be balanced against her cover identity as Nancy Walsh, with career implications that extended far beyond immediate tactical success. The woman who had hidden her capabilities for 18 months now faced decisions about whether continued concealment remained possible or desirable. 3 months later, Nancy Walsh stood in the Oval Office wearing the dress blue uniform of a newly promoted special agent in charge, her shoulders bearing insignia that reflected capabilities rather than administrative convenience. "President." Harrison smiled as he presented her with a medal that couldn't be worn publicly, but represented recognition for service that had prevented national tragedy through extraordinary personal sacrifice and professional excellence. "Agent Walsh," the president said with warmth that reflected genuine gratitude rather than political obligation. "Your actions that day remind us that heroism often comes from unexpected places and that the most important victories are sometimes achieved by people whose names will never appear in history books." His words carried weight that acknowledged both her sacrifice and her continuing service to principles larger than personal recognition. Nancy's new position as head of the Presidential Protective Detail represented both recognition of her capabilities and acceptance of the visibility that came with senior leadership responsibilities. The nervous administrative assistant was gone forever, replaced by someone whose legend would inspire future generations of protective agents while maintaining the professional standards that defined excellence in service to others. Elena Vasquez had died in that training accident 2 years earlier, but Nancy Walsh had been reborn through trials that tested every aspect of her character and capabilities. The woman who had saved a president's life continued her service with quiet pride in work that protected democracy, while requiring personal sacrifices that few would understand or appreciate. She had found her place in the light after 18 months in shadows, carrying forward the legacy of excellence that defined true professionalism in service to others. 5 years had passed since that autumn afternoon at the Kennedy Center, and the woman who had once been called Nervous Nancy now stood before a classroom of young Secret Service trainees at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center in Georgia. Special Agent in Charge Nancy Walsh commanded the room with quiet authority, her presence inspiring the kind of respect that came from demonstrated excellence rather than imposed hierarchy. The students before her represented the future of presidential protection, each one carefully selected for abilities that would be tested in ways they couldn't yet imagine. The morning sunlight streamed through tall windows onto faces that reflected the diversity Nancy had fought to see in federal law enforcement throughout her career. Among the trainees sat Maria Santos, a former Marine sniper whose precision rivaled anything Nancy had achieved during her own legendary career. Beside her, James Chun processed information with the analytical mind that would make him invaluable during complex threat assessments. In the back row, Sarah Blackwood maintained the quiet confidence that marked natural leaders who would eventually guide protection operations for future presidents. Excellence in protective service, Nancy began, her voice carrying the measured authority of someone who had faced ultimate tests and emerged stronger, isn't about following protocols blindly or maintaining comfortable assumptions about threats and capabilities. It's about recognizing that the most critical moments often require thinking beyond established parameters while maintaining the discipline that keeps protected persons safe. Her words carried weight earned through experience that extended far beyond textbook knowledge. Nancy moved among the trainees with movements that reflected the physical conditioning she had maintained, despite transitioning from operational roles to leadership responsibilities. Her presence in the classroom represented a fundamental shift in how the Secret Service approached training and professional development, emphasizing adaptability and critical thinking over rigid adherence to procedures that might prove inadequate. During unprecedented situations, Agent Walsh, Maria Santos raised her hand with the confident bearing of someone accustomed to being heard in professional environments. The case studies we've reviewed suggest that successful protection often depends on personnel who exceed normal expectations. How do we identify and develop those capabilities? Her question revealed understanding that went beyond routine training requirements to address fundamental questions about human potential and professional excellence. Nancy smiled with the warmth of someone who recognized genuine curiosity and professional ambition in a student's question. Exceptional capability often exists in people who haven't been given opportunities to demonstrate what they can accomplish. Our job as leaders is to create environments where excellence can emerge from unexpected places while maintaining the standards that ensure mission success. Her response reflected lessons learned through years of observation and analysis that had shaped her approach to leadership development. The classroom discussion continued with questions that revealed the intellectual sophistication of trainees who understood that modern protection operations required capabilities extending far beyond traditional law enforcement training. Nancy guided their exploration of tactical concepts while sharing insights that came from experience in situations where theory met reality under the highest possible stakes. Her teaching methods emphasized critical thinking and adaptive response over memorization and routine compliance. Agent Director Patricia Hawkins appeared in the doorway during the morning session, her presence indicating the continuing relationship between mentor and former subordinate that had developed since Nancy's promotion to senior leadership. Hawkins had fought bureaucratic battles to ensure Nancy's true capabilities were recognized and properly utilized, transforming what could have been a cover-up into a model for how exceptional talent should be identified and developed within federal agencies. Students, Hawkins addressed the classroom with the authority that had defined her distinguished career. You're receiving instruction from someone whose actions prevented a national tragedy through capabilities that weren't recognized by colleagues. Who should have known better? Agent Walsh's experience demonstrates that excellence often exists in people who haven't been given opportunities to show what they can accomplish. Her words provided context that elevated Nancy's teaching beyond routine professional development. Nancy's response reflected the humility that had characterized her approach to recognition and professional advancement since her identity was revealed during the Kennedy Center crisis. Director Hawkins is generous with her praise, but the lesson for all of you is that service requires focusing on mission accomplishment rather than personal recognition. The most important work often happens without fanfare or public acknowledgement, and professional satisfaction comes from knowing you've contributed to something larger than individual achievement. The afternoon session focused on tactical scenarios that required trainees to think beyond conventional responses, while maintaining the discipline necessary for effective protection operations. Nancy designed exercises that tested analytical capabilities and adaptive thinking, recognizing that future threats would likely exceed current training parameters in ways that required intellectual flexibility combined with operational competence. Her approach reflected understanding that preparation meant developing judgment rather than simply memorizing procedures. During the practical exercises, Nancy observed each trainee's performance with the analytical eye that had served her throughout her operational career. Maria Santos demonstrated the kind of precision that suggested potential for specialized roles, requiring exceptional marksmanship. James Chun displayed analytical capabilities that would prove valuable during complex threat assessments. Sarah Blackwood showed leadership instincts that marked her as someone who could guide others during high-stress situations. Agent Santos, Nancy called during the shooting exercise, "Your grouping is excellent, but I want you to consider how environmental factors might affect accuracy during real-world operations. Weather conditions, stress responses, and time constraints can all impact performance in ways that controlled training can't fully replicate." Her feedback reflected understanding that came from experience in situations where theoretical knowledge met practical challenges under extreme pressure. Nancy's teaching extended beyond technical skills to include lessons about professional integrity and ethical decision-making that would define each trainee's career throughout their service. Her approach emphasized that protective operations required moral courage along with physical capabilities, recognizing that the most difficult choices often involved balancing competing priorities while maintaining commitment to mission accomplishment and public service. The day concluded with a session on professional development that addressed how trainees could contribute to organizational excellence while building careers that reflected their individual capabilities and interests. Nancy shared insights about navigating bureaucratic challenges while maintaining focus on substantive contributions that enhanced mission effectiveness. Her advice reflected hard-won wisdom about balancing personal ambition with service requirements. Your careers will present opportunities to demonstrate capabilities that others might not recognize or appreciate initially, Nancy told the assembled trainees as the session ended. Professional satisfaction comes from knowing you've contributed to mission success regardless of whether others understand or acknowledge your contributions. Excellence in service means focusing on results rather than recognition while maintaining standards that reflect well on the organization and the people you're sworn to protect. As trainees filed out of the classroom, Nancy remained behind to review lesson plans and prepare materials for the following day's instruction. Her transition from operational roles to training responsibilities had proven personally rewarding in ways she hadn't anticipated when first accepting leadership positions that required different skills than her previous assignments. Teaching allowed her to influence the next generation of protective agents while contributing to organizational improvement in ways that extended beyond individual performance. Nancy's phone displayed a message from her mother, Nancy Walsh, who continued to worry about her daughter's work in federal law enforcement despite limited understanding of specific responsibilities and risks. The text was characteristic of their ongoing relationship, expressing pride in Nancy's achievements while requesting reassurance about her safety and well-being. Nancy responded with warmth and appreciation for continuing support that had sustained her through challenging transitions. The evening found Nancy in her office reviewing personnel files for advanced training candidates who would eventually fill specialized roles requiring exceptional capabilities and judgment. Her recommendations would influence career trajectories for agents whose potential might not be recognized through normal evaluation processes, reflecting her commitment to ensuring that organizational excellence wasn't limited by conventional thinking about talent identification and development. Among the files was a preliminary assessment of Agent Rebecca Martinez, whose administrative background concealed operational experience that could prove valuable during complex protection assignments. Nancy recognized patterns in Martinez's record that suggested capabilities exceeding her current position, noting similarities to her own career progression before circumstances forced revelation of hidden expertise. Her recommendation would ensure Martinez received opportunities to demonstrate true potential. The federal building grew quiet as evening settled over the training center, leaving Nancy alone with work that would shape the future of presidential protection through the careers of agents she had influenced during their formative training experiences. Her impact extended beyond individual instruction to include policy recommendations and procedural improvements that enhanced organizational effectiveness while maintaining the traditions of excellence that defined Secret Service operations. Nancy's reflection on her career journey revealed satisfaction that came from service that had evolved through circumstances she couldn't have anticipated when first accepting administrative assignments that seemed beneath her capabilities. The woman who had once hidden extraordinary skills behind a facade of nervous inadequacy now contributed to organizational excellence through leadership that recognized and developed exceptional potential in others who might otherwise remain unrecognized. The transformation from Elena Vasquez to Nancy Walsh to Special Agent in Charge represented more than career advancement or professional recognition. It demonstrated that excellence eventually finds expression regardless of obstacles or setbacks, and that true service requires adapting capabilities to meet changing requirements, while maintaining commitment to principles that transcend individual ambition or recognition. Nancy's legacy would live on through the agents she trained and the policies she influenced, creating ripple effects that would enhance protective operations for years beyond her own career. The woman who had saved a president's life through hidden capabilities now ensured that future threats would be met by professionals whose excellence had been recognized and developed rather than concealed and wasted through bureaucratic limitations or conventional thinking. As Nancy prepared to leave the office and conclude another day of service that honored both her past achievements and her current responsibilities, she carried forward the quiet satisfaction of someone who had found purpose through dedication to excellence regardless of recognition or reward. The nervous tremor that had once defined her public persona was gone forever, replaced by the steady confidence of someone who had proven that capability and character ultimately prevail over prejudice and assumption. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, You won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.